material stuff,
Yeah, of
stuff
course.
that at the
Yeah,
time may have been
yeah.
top dollar, but now it's
No, no, it's
paperweight, maybe.
I bought, yeah, paperweight, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Haridas, thank you
yeah,
so much for being here today. I really
of course.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to get to sit and talk with you because I haven't been at Ananda for long, but it's been a good 6 years now.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, and I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of really cool people, but you've been in India this whole time.
That is right. Just got back.
Yeah, where were you staying in India?
We were, it was two tours of duty. First tour of duty was '05, and my wife and I went over to Gurgaon,
Hmm.
Delhi area. And then being self-financed after 5 years, it was time to, replenish. So off we went. And then we ran the South Bay Center, Los Angeles area for 2 years. Then Swami called us back, and then it was 12 years in Bangalore.
Oh wow. So
Yeah,
Delhi, LA, then Bangalore.
that's right.
How
Yeah.
was it adjusting to India the first time?
It wasn't, there wasn't any adjustment. I came with 5 people back in 1980.
Hmm.
And this was specifically because one of our party of five, this was pre the formal
Hmm.
pilgrimages. And she had this intuition, which turned out to be true, that Ananda Ma was likely going to be passing soon.
Oh.
So sure enough, 2 years later, in '82, then she left her body. And so I was in seclusion at the time. I was a monk. Nitai was the head monk. He knocked on my teepee door, if you can do such a thing with canvas, and said, "Would I like to go to India?" And I just thought, it's like you want to go to the moon. It was just so far away
Hmm.
from my thought of something that would be possible. But the next day, all of a sudden, there was an explosion inside, so to speak, and I went and said, "Okay, fine." And so it was, 6 weeks fundraising, all that kind of stuff, and then off we went. And we finally caught up with Ananda Ma. We were there for a month, um, in was it? Yeah, Ranchi. And
Hmm.
so we didn't know because she travels all the time and she was, now in her later years. So you'd go to Dehradun. Have you seen Ma? Well, I think that she's over here. And so for a month, and then there were many other things. Of course, we went to Kolkata
Ah,
to see, the master's nephew and
wow.
all of that. And it was wonderful. So being raised in Los Angeles, Master said that Mexico and India, there was a lot of similarities,
Hmm.
and in the refinement of the people, the devotion, the food, hot, many things. So, being in Los Angeles, we were 2 hours away from the border. We were there all the time,
Hmm.
and with my family and friends. And so, coming to India in 1980, really, that first time there was no transition. I didn't know if I'd ever get back. It was love at first sight. I didn't want to leave,
Hmm.
but there it was 25 years later. Then Swami, starting in '03, a couple of years
Hmm.
before we came over. Um, my wife and I, our daughter came to at the time to visit. We were just, absolutely stunned that we would have that opportunity
Right.
to be with him, and it was very precious. And so, anyway, India is near and dear. We stay in close touch with our
Hmm.
Bangalore friends there,
Right.
and also throughout India. And they're going to be coming next year for the 100th, and we're
Wow.
looking forward to that. The meditation retreat, getting ready to host them. And anyway, it was a very, very precious time. But when they say, which we get all the time with their transition, this next, this last time, because we just got back in Halloween this year after 18 years, he said no, because we've always considered the meditation retreat Little India.
Ah.
So
Hmm.
it's just with vibration and
Right.
all of that. We had managed for 6 years, 25 years ago at the meditation retreat, without saying it really had changed. Mostly not the vibration, but the physical plane. The previous managers had done a stupendous job in just,
Mm-hmm.
how you say, lifting the physical plane.
Right.
So, anyway, the long and short of it is, no, it's just as comfortable as one can be, as comfortable as one can be with being on staff at retreat, because
Uh,
it's just
it's 24/7.
it's endless.
Uh-huh.
It's just endless. So, what I tell people when they kind of ask about, your daily schedule and so on, it makes me smile. But my thought is just being a farmer,
Mm.
the farmer that enjoys their life,
Uh-huh.
um, then they know that pacing themselves is everything, or they go back to
Right.
the city and go get a job,
Right.
because it'll just take you to a point where you're just banging your head against the wall, because you just
Mm-hmm.
don't know how all these puzzle parts could come together. But if it's fun,
Yeah.
which it is, then it all comes together because you do what you can.
Right.
And it's great for being a karma yogi, which
Mm-hmm.
is there's so many curveballs all the
Right.
time. As a matter of fact, just on just this week, Deva Leela was ill,
Mm-hmm.
and so in a matter of minutes, we got a little emergency, and she said, "Can we take over the week?" And we've done a lot of programs over the years, but we had never had that particular experience, and we just finished a
Mm-hmm.
couple hours back. Wonderful folks
Wow.
that came. It was lovely, but that's not typically what happens, but so many scenarios that look like that.
Right.
It's just, it's constant. Yeah,
You.
but the guest is God, so
Yeah.
we're loving it.
Happy
Yeah,
to serve.
yeah.
You mentioned karma yoga. How would you describe that? Because some people that are tuning in are not
Hmm.
necessarily really even familiar with Ananda per se.
Yeah, sure.
So how would you describe karma yoga?
Well, years ago, when Swami was basically doing everything, I came in 1970, and he did all the weekend programs. He was there in the city 5 days a week, doing classes, generating the income to build
Mm-hmm.
the retreat. So, so many things. So we had an example of a karma yogi right there, because how could he do that? How could he keep with that pace? And that doesn't even begin to describe all the other activities that he
Right.
had: radio shows and writing books. And, again, as a Renaissance man, he was able to do that. As Master said, don't even try to keep up with me. You'll burn up.
Ah.
And so
Uh-huh.
with Swami, same. You just you do what you can
Mm-hmm.
to lift your energy level, knowing that this guy, they come around every 100 years or so,
Right.
and what they're able to accomplish is amazing. So in the early years, in doing all the classes there at the meditation retreat, because the expanding light hadn't come up out of
Mm-hmm.
the ground yet, he would say after the classes always, um, God's a doer. When he was,
Mm.
thank you so much, Swami, for the God's a doer. Well, it was a bit, uh, hard to get a grasp of what that was. I knew he was sincere. I knew that it was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that this was something to aspire to, all of that. So, bit by bit, not that we've got that down yet, but, we're what I like to call perspiring yogis, not only aspiring, but perspiring as we're working out,
Right.
our karma and surfing and all. But basically, the thought is let go and let God. Get out of the way.
Hmm.
And in India, it's called nishkam karma,
Hmm.
desireless action. And so it really does take, it's an art,
Right.
as it is to do anything. But with being a karma yogi, uh, at one point it occurs to us that we've all come down with a purpose,
Hmm.
each one of us. And believe it or not, the purpose is different for everyone, and there can be confusion around, I'm doing a good thing, but I'm not feeling free inside. What
Hmm.
is that?
Hmm.
Because we've come down to work out our karma.
Hmm.
So a person that maybe in a previous lifetime was a captive of industry, now it's time to him to shine shoes,
Hmm.
because the quality that's needed is humility, perhaps.
Hmm.
So this takes intuition, this takes trial and error. All of this is tricky, but ideally, uh, to be, a karma yogi that's moving forward at hopefully a reasonable pace, one wants to know who they are and where they're going. Very important. So the purpose of life. A lot of people are in trouble because they don't know who they are. They don't know where they're going. They don't have a clue as to the purpose of life. But the purpose of life is to be free. That's it. And so at one point we've had enough of all the excitement that this world has to offer. We still, love everyone and have fun doing our various things that we do in the world, but the inner world begins to become a priority. And out of the Bible, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things shall be added unto you. Everyone's doing the opposite. And so that doesn't work out so well, because by the time they're 80, they think, oh my God, this God stuff, I've got to get into it. By that time, they're either in a walker or gone.
Clock's ticking.
And anyone at any age, of course, can receive this call and go for it, and find God and find true meaning in life. So to be a karma yogi is to be a scientist, as we all are. To experiment, to be an explorer, to see what is this karma yoga stuff. And bit by bit, the energization exercises are fabulous because they're, of course, much more than physical exercise. It's all about energy flow. So we start to think, I'm feeling an energy that, as I'm doing these exercises that Yogananda developed, maybe that can be translated to washing the dishes. This energy flow I'm feeling that's more than something physical. It's an undercurrent. And so we begin to, take those baby steps to being a karma yogi, where bit by bit we are beginning to be less interested in orbiting around ourselves and more interested in this flow, which is, of course, drawn from the superconscious. And it's as Yogananda said, you want to be happy, make good choices. Every moment can be thought of as the crossroads, which of course it is. Are we going to go for the light, or are we going to go, and do other things? And so bit by bit, we begin to get enthused about this energy flow and how we can be so aware. And, of course, it grows on us, this growing awareness that we want to see if, these thoughts can be refined. A disciplined mind's a happy mind. So we become a karma yogi just in our own minds to see if we can, bit by bit, release any of the thoughts that are of no value. They pretend they are. They're always masquerading. That's the ego's job. And the ego is not the enemy. The ego is a friend. It's our sparring partner. And so we begin to be more and more directed here, where we find that joy and so on, instead of here, which is, of course, where the ego lives. And it just takes, just experimenting. And at one point, we really, really make that discovery of the inner life, and we don't want to go back. And we find that the inner experience and the outer experience are soulmates, and they help each other. And if we can tune into, and it takes, awareness, growing awareness, we can tune into the flow of life. And there's so much out there, being in the flow and, all that stuff. I mean, and it's great. It's great. And it's true. But it takes the yogis, which have been at it for thousands of years, to really offer it in such a simple form that we can begin to grasp it. And the master teachers are the ones that really can step down, my God, how much they know to the first grader. And one doesn't want to overwhelm the first grader with trigonometry and the rest of that stuff. And so let's work with spelling cat, and let's, do the numbers and all that. So these great yogis that have awakened from the dream, they're the true karma yogis, because they're out of the way now, and they're just in a flow. So anyway, to aspire to be a karma yogi is really the only game in town,
Right.
because we find that the inner work that we're doing is a form of karma yoga, in
Right.
disciplining our minds, keeping our hearts open, all of that. The outer work that we're doing, hopefully it's meaningful and something that's, giving us a growing freedom,
Mm-hmm.
which means that bit by bit we're discharging our karma, and that's why we come down to this earth to do. Um, so that's the long and short of it, and there's so much that one can say
Yeah.
about, aspiring to be a karma yogi.
At what age did you become a spiritual scientist? Was it something that you were always interested in? Was it something that dawned on you one day? Was it?
Well, interestingly, because we were in Los Angeles, 2 hours from the border, and in Mexico all the time, all over Mexico, it was fabulous.
Hmm.
Um, we were in Guadalajara, high mass, Christmas time. I'm half Catholic and half Jew. So when people say, "What'd you do about that?" I say, "Well, I went surfing." But you know,
Pick a third
yeah,
route.
yeah, it's like, oh my God. But anyway, my folks were in their own way very spiritual people, and so my brother and I went, with the family there, my mother and father, to high mass, Guadalajara, deep into Mexico, and I had a deep experience.
Hmm.
Now, I couldn't do anything with it. I was only 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was into firecrackers because I had a flourishing firecracker business, bringing, goods in from Mexico. My friends couldn't await, my
Import,
arrival.
export. Yeah.
And gold coins, I had a nice,
Ah.
and so on. So, basic stuff that kids would do. But luckily, my soul recognized that this was a true vibration, and I should bookmark it. I wasn't ready for it. I was very
Mm.
aware of that because, I was just horsing around having fun with all my buddies. But it was a true experience. And so then, 5 years later, a friend gave me Master's teachings and Love at First Sight, and I
Mm.
recognized that vibration that was there in that at the High Mass in this wonderful cathedral in Mexico 5 years prior as the same vibration.
Mm.
And so there wasn't any head scratching to go on. It was just like, oh my God, it's back again. But this time I thought, something, I wasn't ready for it 5 years ago for all the obvious reasons,
Mhm.
but now I am. And so at that point, seeing Master's picture, um, reading that first, it was Master Said, which Swami had a part in playing. He did about 25% of Master Said, which is now Sayings of Yogananda.
Ah.
And the first one, as I recall, was yearn for God like a drowning man yearns for breath. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, if that was all I had and I was on a desert island, that would be enough for
Right.
this lifetime.
Right.
It was everything to me. And so, Master was a monk. I wanted to be a monk. But the thing that was very difficult for me at that time was that uh, I didn't want to go to SRF. I didn't want to be a monk at SRF, I should say.
Right.
Or if I was going to be a monk at SRF, uh, then I needed to really think about it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sometimes when people ask, the difference between SRF and Ananda, well, Guru is the same, Kriya is the same, all that. But I say, well, in my thought, because I was a Lake Shrine boy,
Uh-huh.
and Turiyananda, who was there at the time, who Swami brought on the path, and Bimalananda, who was a
Mm-hmm.
direct disciple, they helped me so much. I was there all the time
Mm.
because I lived in Manhattan Beach on the coast. In an hour or so, I was at Lake Shrine, and then in another hour, I was in Topanga Canyon, where my
Ah.
second parents lived. So, I
Ah.
mean, it was like, and I was just up and down all the time.
Mhm.
So, basically, again, I had to table this, my God, I want to be a monk, but why wouldn't I be a monk
Mm.
in the monastery? But it's because my thought was that SRF was the father. I didn't really think of it at that time, but I felt it. And it's both are needed,
Uh-huh.
father and mother, but I was looking for the mother.
Ah.
And so it wasn't a lot of fun for me, but I probably hitchhiked about 10,000 miles. That was my budget. If I had a different budget, I would have taken it in a
Uh-huh.
moment, but I didn't. Car, hotels, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my budget, and I was all over the States and Mexico and Canada and everything, not even knowing what to look for, except that I had this thought that there was perhaps a spiritual family for me out there.
Mm.
And so 2 years, it was tough. because, I didn't mind, the travel. It was fine. It was fun. But I really wanted my family.
Mm.
And I didn't even know the question to ask.
Hmm.
Well, a friend of my brother, God bless him, gave me one of Swami's first, not the book, but a little address that was clipped out of the book. This was Yoga
Hmm.
Postures for Self-Awareness.
Ah.
The original address, 900 Allegheny Star Road, Ananda. Yogananda, Ananda. Okay, I have another clue.
Hmm.
So I made my way there, and uh, I saw the people, and I thought, oh my God, in Manhattan Beach, I'd see, maybe a grocer had a bright face, and maybe somebody else across town, and so on. But I'd never seen a bumper crop of angels like this, and I was just stunned by it. And so, luckily, this was down at the village. I got a ride up to the meditation retreat, and Swami, he'd moved in either the week prior to my coming. This was May 25th of 1970. I remember it because Bill Cox, Satya,
Mm.
signing his little ticket as Bill Cox at the time, didn't have the spiritual name at that point, signed me in, and I kept the receipt, still have it, precious item.
Hmm.
And met Swami, a man in his 40s, and I saw him, and I just went, oh my God. I was just stunned by it. Then it was time for the next prayer. God, I hope I can stay. And as it
Yeah.
worked out, I was made a member in September of that same year, joined the monastery. There was no monastery, but Swami the following year said who would like to join the monastery. There were 7 of us then that joined, and then I was a monk for 12 years. So
About
that
how
was,
old were you at the time?
I came at 19.
At 19. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you were young when you
Yeah, I was
first
young. Yeah,
stepped
I
on.
started the path at 17, and luckily my father, a deeply spiritual man, and my mother again in her own way, but he was doing something quite radical, which was he was a civil engineer in Beverly Hills. He found that after a year, he woke up with this, God, he was stunned by it. He had driven home from Beverly Hills to Manhattan Beach every night and didn't know how he got there. He was
Ah.
so lost in thought. He
Hmm.
he told me he had a spiritual experience. He never told me what it was. And so, luckily, this was 68. Luckily, I had my father, who then went on sabbatical. We built a house together for 3.5 years, an apartment onto our existing house in Manhattan Beach. He was just a living example for me and my mother too, but certainly my father, in that he just glowed.
Huh.
He was a man
Hmm.
that was content, and that's again, as they say, in the Indian scriptures, contentment, santosh, is
Hmm.
the word, is one of the supreme virtues.
Hmm.
And so, anyway, that was really fortunate for me because that was then a companion, happened to be my father, on the path in his own way,
Hmm.
in my own way, but he was supportive.
Right.
And so it was a very, 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 very lucky, if you want to use the word for me, that I had support because all of my friends, I had a ton of friends, and I love them all to this day. I haven't seen them forever, but they were spiritual in their own way too. But when they saw how sincere I was, they
Hmm.
started to drop away. We all still
Right.
all loved each other, but it was just like finally after, maybe I started with a dozen or 2 dozen friends, maybe there was 2 left, just
Uh-huh.
kind of observing, now what's going to happen,
Right.
maybe we'll have to pick them up from the ground and dust them off and, have them get with the program again,
Hmm.
which is partying and having fun.
Uh-huh.
So that was tough too,
Yeah.
because there wasn't the understanding, there wasn't the support.
Right.
Um, but Lake Shrine saved me, Bhimalananda saved me,
Hmm.
Turiyananda saved me, and I asked them a million questions, and
Ah.
they were so patient with me, answering them and all. And Ananda never came up,
Ah, right, because
ever.
they're SRF, so they
They're
wouldn't
SRF.
mention it.
Mm,
Hmm.
nope.
Mm-hmm.
So, that added to the excitement of me trying to find the place.
Right.
Hmm.
Was so before you said that mass in Mexico, that was
Hmm.
your first kind of experience.
Hmm.
Did something bring it? Was it music? Was it the people? Was it
It was
something
the
that said
vibration. It was the
just the
vibration.
whole
It
feeling of
was
the
a
place?
knockout vibration.
Hmm.
Christmas time is powerful, as we know,
Right.
anywhere that has a nice devotional
Yeah.
charge. In Mexico, they do it up in a big way.
Really?
And yeah, so and so devout and so forth. So it just took me by surprise. I had no. I was just kind of looking at 12-year-old. Oh, that's a nice statue, and I mean, whatever. The stained glass windows. I have no
Right.
idea. That was too long ago. But to this day, I can recapture the vibration,
Wow.
and it was just a knockout.
Right.
Yeah, it stunned me. It absolutely stunned me.
And so it was the same vibration you felt when you came to Lake Shrine and then to Ananda,
It
would you
was the
say?
same vibration when a friend gave me, one of my buddies there in Manhattan Beach gave me the Master Said.
Ah.
He said, I think you'd like that. Now, I can't figure out why he thought I would like it. We were all, doing spiritual things in our
Mm-hmm.
own way. Um, but I'll have to ask him one of these days.
Yeah.
Why? And I don't even know if he knows
Uh-huh.
why. But that book was it. That
Really.
was, I still have my first original copy that I got from Lake Shrine. I went out and got it quickly as soon as I knew that Lake Shrine existed, and it was
Uh-huh.
just like, a hitchhike hour north of where we were. Um, and then that was everything to me.
It's amazing how
Yeah,
one little gesture that he probably didn't even think twice about, he just was off the
yeah,
top of his head, here, try this book,
yeah.
has the power just to totally
That was it. That was my
a
life. He
180.
gave me my life.
Wow.
Yeah, and I of course keep him in my prayers because people that are come along the way, whatever it might be, a book, some thing that they say that has that power. That's
Mm-hmm.
it.
Right.
It's the sound of one hand clapping. You're just absolutely
Mm.
you stop on a dime because you know that the clouds have parted and there's this ray of
Mm.
light that's come into your life in whatever form, and that's it.
Right.
And it's one person isn't any better than the other. One takes years and years to get on the path. Another one gets a lightning bolt.
Mm-hmm.
It's what are we going to do with that?
Mm-hmm.
The gift. What are we
Right.
going to do with that? So
Mm-hmm.
that's why Master talked about the 80-year-old woman who was a, absolutely, supercharged atheist that
Uh,
found God in 4 years when she discovered Yogananda. And
wow.
I've always loved that example because it underscores that age has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's handy if you're a young guy. It's handy. I was young at one point and young at heart still. But anyone then that finds their way to the inner life, my God, there's no
Mm.
greater gift in this world.
Mm.
And then add to that the guru and everything else we have. I mean, we are so spoiled.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just beyond what we can imagine right
Mhm.
now.
You
Yeah.
mentioned kind of the fatherly energy and
Mm-hmm.
with SRF and the motherly energy of SRF. What
Mm-hmm.
maybe can you piece that out a little bit more? In what ways did that manifest?
Well, for me, it was a feeling. And I was taking it seriously because my thought was, I mean, if you're going to be a monk, you're going to be a monk at SRF. I didn't know Ananda existed. So one of my thoughts was, because I was hitchhiking everywhere, I was going to go to the East Coast, go to Vermont. What's Vermont? But, get snowed in a little cabin, all of this in
Mm-hmm.
my imagination, and then really have it out with God. Was I
Mm.
going to be a monk at SRF?
Mm.
Because I felt like it was a lifelong calling,
Right.
to pursue the path. And anyway, that never happened. I got as far as Eureka, Northern California,
Not very
when
far.
it was time now to head to Ananda because I
Uh-huh.
had finally gotten a little clue, that little snippet of the address
Uh-huh.
that my brother's friend had given me. And so, thinking about the father and the mother, it was primarily a vibration. And Bimalananda and Turiyananda were the mothers.
Uh,
Yeah. So there was no question about that. But it was just a vibration. You could call it, you know, um, various rules that maybe I stumbled across.
mhm.
I only went to Lake Shrine. I didn't
Right.
even know if I knew the other places existed. Odd to
Right.
say, but that was I was happy to be there.
Uh-huh.
And that was it for me. And it's
Right.
an incredible place. And but it was just a vibration that it wasn't that it was unattractive, but
Mm-hmm.
it just had a sternness to it.
Right.
And again, it wasn't coming from Bimalan and Turiyananda, not at all.
Right.
but there was something there that I was picking up on. So I can't even put my finger on it, but it was there. And enough for me to be thinking, why am I not a monk at SRF? What am I going to become a monk at a Trappist monastery when I'm dedicated to
Yeah.
master? It didn't make any sense to me,
Right.
etc. So it was tough. It was tough.
Uh-huh.
But that's part of the fun on the path. These various challenges and tests that we have to go through. So then meeting Swami, to me, was the mother
Right.
and the place and the people,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. Also, come to think of it, a little bit, because I wasn't. Maybe I attended some of the services. I forget at Lake Shrine. I don't remember now. But some of the people I met were pretty impersonal.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, lots of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. So
Right.
that gives you a clue as to what was going on in my mind. And they were fine. I could see, I could see a light there. I didn't have any problem with that. Are they attuned or something? It was none of that. But impersonal, and I didn't know personal from impersonal. For God's sakes,
Right.
I was, at best, suffering from, as Master said, uh, spiritual indigestion, trying to sort out all this stuff as a teenager.
Right.
It was over my head. And I had to tell my mind, because, being, there, in LA, be a rock star, that sounds attractive, open a large veterinarian complex with my girlfriend, be a movie star, all the things that, that's, all there and stuff. But I just thought, something, um, my mind, and I addressed my mind. I said, something, sorry about this, but I'm going with my heart.
Hmm.
And you're just gonna have to catch up as best you can. I feel it's nothing against you. I love you too. But this is it now.
Hmm.
I knew it. This
Mm-hmm.
is it. This is my lifelong calling. And so my poor mind, it was not happy
Mm-hmm.
because it was just and my mother, good Jewish mother. I'll give you a house. I'll give an apartment, college, any college you want to go, car, sports car, find you a girlfriend, a wife. I mean, everything was laid out, and not interested in
Hmm.
because I wasn't.
Hmm.
It was the calling was there, and it was real. I knew it was real
Right.
to be on the path, and at this point to be a monastic. So that was tough too because it was an affluent situation where I was raised, and all of this could have been handed to me.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. How was it adjusting to
No temptation.
really? Hmm.
Absolutely none. By the time I was 17, I kind of started at 13 with, everything under the sun. So in that 4-year period, thankfully, I survived,
Mm-hmm.
I was done. I had had
Yeah.
enough of everything.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it was a wholesome household. Where I was raised, all that was good. But my friends and I, we went up to the edge always, right
Yeah.
up to the edge.
Mm-hmm.
Some went over the edge, sad to say, but most of our friends just right up the edge with, how much we were, willing to, driving fast,
Mm-hmm.
surfing at night. Yeah, I mean, my God, it goes on
Just
forever. Typical
experimenting with
teenager
life.
stuff.
Yeah.
Typical teenager stuff.
Right.
But, we took it to the edge because that was fun for us. More
Right.
excitement.
Mm-hmm. Exciting. So how was it adjusting then to the life of a monk?
There was no problem on one level because my heart is full.
Right.
On another level, the spiritual indigestion continued because I was so austere. I was living in a teepee at the time. And so I had my orange beanbag pillow where I would meditate. And if I wasn't meditating, I would just sit there. I wouldn't even read a book, but rarely.
Hmm.
Ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculous. So, it was completely out of balance.
Uh-huh.
And at one point, I was seeing, now, can I meditate more than I'm sleeping? So that was the competition.
Yeah.
So, okay, I did pretty good. I meditated 6 hours a day and I only slept 5.5. I mean, ridiculous stuff. I wasn't ready for any of that.
Right.
My poor nerves. But luckily, Nitai the head monk, we had, Kesava the head monk, etc., different ones. were good examples, for
Hmm.
moderation, and yet strong sadhana was always emphasized and everything. So it was, uh, the early years were tough.
Yeah.
They were tough. Beautiful. Swami was there. I mean, my God, it goes on and on. All the blessings, but the poor mind. It was
Hmm.
thinking,
Right.
oh my God, this is tough.
What
This
have you
is
gotten us
really
into?
really tough. Sorry.
Yeah. You're just gonna have to deal with
I'll do my best to fan you off from time to time.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's one thing I've come to realize more and more is that our minds work with just such limited data, and
Hmm.
that's what causes so much of our anxiety because
Yeah.
we just don't. Whereas the heart, on some
Hmm.
level, just sees the whole picture
That's right.
or can feel maybe the whole picture.
That's right.
And yeah, so the mind's always like
Yeah.
feels like in the dark a little bit.
Yeah. But it's a buddy
Hmm.
because more and more as we're seasoned on the spiritual path, there isn't any conflict.
Hmm.
Sometimes the mind, call it whatever you will, call it intellect, call it intuition that, is drawn, in the heart. They're buddies.
Hmm.
They're buddies. There isn't any, today I won. I had more insight than you did, blah, blah. There's
Yeah.
none of that. It's just,
Yeah.
the thought is let's work together as a team.
Right.
The many hands make a miracle applies, to our own inner being. But the initiation, I said one time to actually the guest at the EL, he was gracious enough to, when he asked me, some pointed questions, about the path. I said, well, basically what I would recommend is write off the first 10 years. So we burst out laughing, but there was an undercurrent of that was serious.
Really.
And I don't remember quite his reaction. I hope he took it, in the right spirit. But at that time, I had been on the path for a while, and knowing that really there was a lot to
Mm.
this project, as
Right.
Master said himself. Granted, this is speaking of the path. It's a big job.
Mm.
I'm in for the long haul,
Mm.
you know.
Right.
And so, it's yeah, I like always to have this thought in mind that the joyous expectation is that God will come and at one point will as a thief in the night. And on the other side, so that I can continue to keep up my enthusiasm, it's the Boston Marathon. So it's a
Hmm.
50-yard dash in the Boston Marathon. You don't know what. That's in Divine Mother's hands.
Right.
Let it be. Just
Hmm.
love God and call that good. So in that way, there's this joyous expectation, and then no expectation because she's going to do what she's, as Swamiji said, ultimately, it's all God's grace. Self-effort, obviously, is vital, but there it is. It's all God's grace. And when
Hmm.
Divine Mother's done with this craziness of us, running around, like idiots, then no one's going to stop her when it's time. The horse
Right.
going back to the barn. No one's going to stop her.
Hmm.
So is it this incarnation? Is the next incarnation? Whatever. But now that we're at the feet of the Guru, it's a heck of a lot closer than
Hmm.
where we were. As Master said, I remember when I was a diamond. I think, oh my God,
A long time.
it's a long haul. But time is space an illusion. And
Hmm.
as Swamiji said so sweetly, no saint comes back and says, what a scam.
Mm.
Not one. And in addition, they say it was all absolutely worthwhile.
Wow.
And so,
Hmm.
we're going to be at that point in time. We're there already as the soul, but, we have a few loose ends with, the human aspect catching up.
Hmm.
But we more and more, we really are taking to heart. We've come out of God. We're in God now with, playing this blind man's bluff with the veil. It doesn't mean that we're out of God, it's all
Hmm.
God. And then we go back to God. And then we're in God for eternity. Dr. Lewis was concerned and said to Master, in these great cycles of time, the night of Brahma, day of Brahma, once I get free and then we're cast out again, am I going to have to do this again?
Start all
And
over.
Master said, no, once you're free, you're free. And it's
Hmm.
in Swami's book, Conversations, that particular episode. So I said to Swami when I read it, his book, I said, Swami, I was concerned about that too. I said,
Hmm.
it really, really helped. He said, well, it hasn't been one of my concerns, but I understand.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, some lingering thought of, oh my God,
This
after you
again.
climb the Himalayan heights and jump off, and, whatever. And then, okay, that was fun. Let's do it
Just
again.
do it.
No, it's permanent.
Yeah,
So that gives us a lot of encouragement.
I think it's really some of the things you touched on already, just making me realize, the importance of having a teacher, a guide, somebody that
Mm,
really knows.
mm,
I see a lot of people, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or wherever,
mm,
they want the technique that I want it now,
mm,
or they want to just sit and meditate all day. I don't want to do anything. I
mm,
just want to meditate
mm,
because
mm.
I don't need to work to be
Yeah,
enlightened.
yeah.
There's all these, one might say pitfalls that you could fall into,
Mm,
but having somebody that knows not only the way forward, but what you need individually.
mm.
Was
Yeah.
that a new concept for you, or how have you seen that um, kind of change over the years since you've come on the path with other people and yourself, maybe?
Well, one, spiritual family. As we used to say in the monastery, if we could get all the monks together, we'd have one saint. And so, at Ananda, as Master said, you want to develop devotion, then satsang is so important. So on one level, we live one another's lives and all of that. But really, for me, speaking personally, when Yogananda came into my life, I knew there was
Hmm.
not going to be any greater gift.
Hmm.
I just knew it. And I knew that as a perfected soul, as I felt he was only going to do, even though sometimes the dentist doesn't like, having to drill a little further down. Sometimes I think that God does open heart surgery without anesthesia, you know, and it's like, the open heart surgery, okay, but babe, come on, what school did you go to? And so, uh, without question, one of my favorite meditations from time to time, I'll look out. Perhaps I'm doing the service or something. I'll look out and see the crowd, and all you see is a master flowing through all these souls,
Hmm.
a testimonial of Master's omnipresence, which of course he is
Hmm.
within and throughout everywhere. So at one point, one begins to just think, "Oh my God, I'm just stunned that I've made base camp.
Hmm.
I'm there with the guru. I've made base camp, and that was a long, long, long haul.
Hmm.
And now I'm surveying the Himalayan heights. And just as the Sherpas in the Himalayas, they're really needed because you can get caught up in an avalanche if you're there, not reading the signs, and you're dead, you
Hmm.
know. So the gurus, that's just on the physical plane with the Sherpas there in Nepal. These guys, because they're awake, they know everything.
Hmm.
Every shortcut. Don't go there. There's a Bengal tiger down 8 feet. You're gone if you jump into that hole. But
Wow.
they know it all. And so when you've got that, growing reassurance that these guys are so keen to give to us what they have, as the master said, I'll come back 1 trillion times. That's a large number. Count up to 1 million and see how big that trillion number is. It's hard to grasp. If you come back even for one person. So for us, there's no question. There is a time where the soul requires, and it's urgent, someone who is,
Hmm.
the carpenter. He's been at it for 30 years. How many shortcuts can you give the neophyte?
Hmm.
Endless.
Hmm.
It's endless. You don't have to do that. You can do this over here and save you half an hour, and so on. So you get the guru on the
Right.
scene. And I mean, that's an apprenticeship that
Hmm.
we have had to work very, very hard to get to this point where we can recognize what these souls are to the extent that we can, and then the privilege of being at their feet
Hmm.
and just to stay there,
Right.
24/7 to the extent, of course, that we can. So God, Christ, and Guru, there's no question about it. And we have to spend time with one another because we love our friends and relatives and so on, but they don't quite know half the time what we're doing,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they really don't want to know too
Uh-huh.
much either.
Hmm.
Maybe you can give them a little, little something, and if they're interested, maybe a little bit more. But for the most part, they're on their journey. And I like the image of a candy shop. If you're in a candy shop, you can't be tempted to one more piece of almond roca or butter brickle or whatever your favorite because you've had enough. You walk out the door.
Hmm.
So we're at the point now with our inner life that we've had enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've had enough of all the outer activities. It's still great stuff and all that, but we're being far more selective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, movies, music we listen to, all of these things, because, time is roaring on by.
Mm-hmm.
And as Master said, in the halls of retrospection, a life could be shown in 2 hours. So guess what? Snap of the fingers, and
Uh,
guess what? It's time to either be recycled or we finally get with the program and we're done with all this
mm-hmm.
nonsense. So again, that's in God's hands. And so for me, really, the blessing of the Guru is that needed lesson where we have that yearning, which is on the human level, and contentment because we're already there.
Hmm.
And when we can put those two together and it actually comes together as one, yoga, union,
Mm-hmm.
then it really begins to be fun.
All right.
Because the yearning is as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Because look in the mirror. Are you done yet? I don't think so. Easy enough. But at the same time, the soul says, "No, you are there.
Uh-huh.
You've always been there."
Right.
So in that way, we know that we're on, we have stable footing because this is just a dream. Yeah.
I think that's a point of confusion for a lot of people because I hear on one hand I'm perfect, on the other hand I have to work for it.
Mm,
So why? If I'm
yeah,
perfect, why do I need to work? And
that's right.
if I need to work, am I not perfect already?
That's
I
right.
mean, how would you answer that question for
It
someone?
takes spiritual maturity. Yogananda said something that is a bit of a stunner. He said, up in the Himalayas, mostly it's just spiritual bums
Hmm.
fighting over caves,
Hmm.
food, and clothing.
Wow.
Why? Because they had this thought, and perhaps it was even a revelation, who knows? But it wasn't grounded. Head in the sky, feet on the ground. And that's his path. So basically they went up there and oh my God, time flew by and they're wondering what the hell's going on,
Mm-hmm.
that realization is eluding them.
Mm-hmm.
Go back down to the city and get a job. Whatever. Come on, it's not happening here. You don't have the power. You're not Ram Gopal who can meditate 18 to 20 hours a day. You can get in that half an hour and you're sweating it out, come on. I mean, get
Mm-hmm.
real. So it's tricky because with spiritual maturity, and that takes time, and that's why spiritual community is so important because there's so many angels here,
Hmm.
as is true of any ashram or spiritual community that really has, the magnetism to
Mm-hmm.
draw as Swamiji has and Master has, these souls that are getting closer and closer and closer. There has to be, all the needed ingredients. There needs to be sense of humor. There has to be long rhythm. There has to be, the desire to introspect. There has to be a sadhana, at
Mm-hmm.
least a daily minimum. All of these things. And so that comes in time. It can't be forced.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. It just can't be forced. And so bit by bit, we begin to appreciate that. I remember years ago, there was this fellow that came and it was all Divine Mother and all that. And I could see at a glance, this guy was, he was in trouble. He was in trouble because he
Uh-huh.
was abusing people because, verbally or otherwise, I mean, he wasn't socking him in the nose, but, he was not being polite. He was not
Uh,
being respectful because it's all wrong and I'm God and all that
uh,
stuff. And I just thought, I didn't say anything to him. He left after a while. But I thought to myself, oh my God,
mm,
oh my God, that's a long haul for the people. We've
mm,
all, had these experiences in so many different forms where we think that we know, we do not.
mm,
One time I went to Swami. I was meditating again. It was outrageous, enormous amount. And I said, Swami, I'm going for broke. And he said, only saints go for broke. And so all of a sudden, I was a Lilliputian. Just, it was so helpful because
mm,
it took me time to recover. My nerves were not happy
mm,
because I was pushing, in a way that was ridiculous,
mm,
absolutely ridiculous. I was going for broke.
mm,
And that's okay. So we have these experiences, but I never did it again
mhm.
because my nerves were not happy. It took me months to recover. I still could function, all that. I don't think anybody really knew, but it was repair time.
Really?
Yeah, it was repair time. to just get the nerves back to being happy again.
Right.
Because I had pushed myself beyond what was reasonable because I was immature. But it
Mm.
was a good lesson because you hit the wall, you don't want to do it twice. Bent nose and cauliflower ears and all that stuff. You really don't care to revisit that.
So it's almost like even with that, you know, the desire and the intensity like still good, but even that needs to be tempered by the wisdom, what's the right pace and to go where your lesson is. Like you're talking about the people that went to the Himalayas. Your lesson's not in the Himalayas, your lesson's in the marketplace,
That's
or
right.
it's in the in the studio or wherever it is.
That's right.
But it's one of the things I've really appreciated about being able to find Yogananda is just that the practicality of it all.
Oh
And
God.
it's not like a magic, say the mantra and you'll be liberated tomorrow, but it's real science.
Yeah.
It's a dealing with the nervous system. And
That's right.
I think for some people, even to bring it down to that practical level is somehow, in their minds, maybe debasing it, or I don't know. Did you see much of that in India where it was?
There's everything in India. But before I get into that thought for a moment, I just consider us on the spiritual path as just a bunch of ditch diggers. That's it. We're just digging out our karma and helping people along the way, of course, as much as we can. But India, uh, on the positive side, people would come. We had a retreat there. We were 9 years in the city, and then we finally had a retreat. We were there for the last 3 years before we left. And people would come, and they would want Korea right now. And it was beautiful. And we would say, well, that's wonderful. Hold on to that inspiration, but it's going to be a little while, not that long. You're not going to have to wait 25 years, but, we've got these steps and so forth. And, they were doing their best to mask their disappointment, They could always get it on the net and, and the local guru who gives it over the weekend and so on. But this is our path. We feel that the foundation is so important.
Right.
With attitude and devotion and balanced living and all that kind of stuff. So there's that. Then on the other level, it's for me, it's kind of a joke, though sad, that a person, he wants to get into business. So this is not necessarily, just people. Yeah, this would be anywhere, but especially perhaps it would be in India because there's so many sadhus there. So he wants to get into business. He thinks, okay, let's see. I don't want really any overhead. Oh! If I get myself an orange cloth and a baking bowl, and tell people I'm God, and that they'll be free. Say anything they don't know. You're God. You'll be free in 5 lifetimes, and oh my God, and pretty soon you're rich and you got a car and all the things, and didn't have to go to college and nothing. This is great. These people are there, and they attract thousands.
Wow.
Oh yeah, sure, but it's okay because at one point they will wake up, from that delusion. Knowing how many people they've led astray. And then the people that have been led astray, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. Then, okay, check it off the bucket list. If you don't want to, put out much effort, but just receive a peacock feather on the head, and then now I'm done, and thank you very much. It only cost me, 100 rupees. That's just how it is. I mean, we all go through that, being eclectic, call it what you will. So in India, everything under the sun.
Really?
But of course, why do we call India at Ananda, India the guru of the world? Because it is. It's the guru of the world. The vibration there is so strong. It's so powerful. And really, really good people. I mean, just a bumper crop of good people. And as Swamiji said, India's work, the explosion of the work, Master's work, is going to dwarf everything else that we're doing worldwide. And you see it really firsthand. It's amazing. So on one level, the Indians are so childlike. I mean, at the retreat, it's my little daughter's birthday. Can I come over so she can get a blessing? You're traveling 2 hours or something. Just go get a blessing at home, and your dad will give you a blessing. So much of that, grandma. They come in. The whole family comes in, and grandma and grandpa and the unks and the uncles and the aunts and all that, and so sweet and so devoted, and and they get it. I mean, they really get it. The vibration is there, and they're doing what they do with their pujas and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but India, um, there's nothing like India.
Mm.
I mean, it really is, as they say in the Chamber of Commerce, coming out of Chamber of Commerce in India, incredible India. Couldn't be better described
Mm.
because it is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
One time I was driving in a car with Indians, and we were going, we were in Delhi. And so I saw again a funny sight. You see it multiple times during the day, something that makes you smile, or you just burst out laughing,
Uh-huh.
funny stuff. A goat on a motorcycle straddled, and the goat's going, where am I? Just really good stuff. So I turned to the Indians. I saw another funny thing. I don't remember what it was. And I turned to them, and they had been there, probably going there, as they were adults. And I said, "Are you still having fun with all the sights here?" They said, "Absolutely." And I thought that perfectly describes the
Mm-hmm.
childlike spirit of the Indians. They're
Mm-hmm.
just it's just they're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
They really are having fun. Yet at the same time, they work very hard, and oh my God, it's incredible the kind of effort that they put out with their family because the uncle is in the house and this
Uh-huh.
one and all the cats and the dogs and the three
Mm-hmm.
kids and how you can negotiate that. That's a full-time job. And then they go and they work corporate 12, 14 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then their spiritual life. I mean, you think one of our friends, I said to him, because I was trying to figure out how we could put out so much energy on the path, and yet he, as a corporate guy, had a team of people working with. And so I wanted to know, after some
Mm-hmm.
years observing, how in the name of God you do this? It seems like you should be two people. They say, well, okay, I'll tell you. I have two computers on my desk, a Sangha computer and, my job. And so there you have it. But to tell you the truth, I mostly work on the Sangha. But he was a sharp guy. He'd
Uh-huh.
get away with that.
Mm.
And otherwise he'd be thrown out of the
Yeah.
company. But he was there for years and
Mm-hmm.
top flight, you know, person in the organization.
So the
But
sangha was just him serving. It was just part of his spiritual life.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So you find that just all over. How do people juggle all of this stuff? Because
Mm-hmm.
their families, I'm, being half Catholic, half Jewish, I know the Jewish part of my family. They were just very tight
Mm-hmm.
knit, very much so. 7 days a week.
Hmm.
Not in our household. This was a
Yeah.
previous generation. My mother's, grandma and all that stuff. 7 days a week.
Hmm.
5 days for lunch. And the weekend, parties.
Right.
7 days a week with the relatives.
Uh-huh.
Good God, it's amazing.
It's intense.
Yeah, of course, but that's not unusual in
Mm-hmm.
India. It's everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, that's just this is their world, and it's beautiful, but it's intense.
Right.
It's very
Yeah.
intense because there's just the juggling that's required.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And our hearts go out to him now. I mean, I've just been hearing about India more and more, and Delhi, close to where you were living, and
Yeah.
just the conflicts going on. And
Mm-hmm.
like I was sharing before, because I didn't know much about, what the conflicts were before that. I had heard Yogananda say that when Hindustan and Pakistan split, that was the biggest dark cloud in his mind was that division, because he could see the conflicts coming. But I researched into it, and basically it comes down to religious differences and land, people wanting land, and I was hearing a radio clip of an old New Dawn radio host show that Swami Kriyananda did, and he talked about not specifically these two countries, but about how the science of yoga would eventually bring us above these religious differences, and just to see like the practical applications of this, not just about us feeling inwardly peaceful and blissful, but even on the external world that we're going to see that manifests, that harmony manifests in time. It's just so, you've talked about vibration a lot and the feeling of something, and it's just, and the head and the heart working together. And it's just amazing how, if you leave the heart and feeling out of it, you can get in such a crazy place, to the point where in the name of peace and love, you're doing these heinous acts and things. And it's just, It's really an interesting time to be.
Well, I think we parachuted down, but I think our purpose has been in part, to find ourselves, but clean up
Hmm. Hmm.
because the place needs a lot of cleanup. And in addition, we owe it to the young children
Hmm.
that we, kind of made a mess of things. Not you so much, but my generation. And so, what can we do
Mm-hmm.
to try to lift consciousness in any way possible?
Right.
Meditation, as Ananda Ma said, if everyone would meditate, wars would cease immediately
Hmm.
because it's all consciousness.
Hmm.
You lift the consciousness, and where's the division?
Hmm.
Where's the enemy? Where's the hatred? It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, when has there not been wars? Welcome to duality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Master, I so much appreciate, he would take his devotees to the movies, and they'd be totally engrossed in whatever it was. And he tapped them on the shoulder just at the moment where they were just, so immersed. And he said, look back at the beam.
Hmm.
And he said, that's what's happening in this world.
Hmm.
It's just this beam of light that is creating this play of light and shadow.
Wow.
And so the yogis know that it's the dream and so on. But some of the dreams are so harsh that you forget it's a dream. It can be losing a loved one. It can be all these things, this international conflict, that kind of thing. And then one has to really, really, hold on to the feet of the guru, go inside, try to, discover, that peace that's always there to get us through, the current situation because it's like so dark. But Master also said this was all purification, that after the wars and all that, there'll be 300 years of peace because people will be sick of wars.
Hmm.
But if you look into history, and you don't have to look too far, it's all conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's just it. Just and what does that mean? Wars and peace, and wars and peace, and so on. So, we're not going to find in this mud ball any shift of that anytime soon. You get a little break from time to time. 300 years of peace sounds pretty attractive,
Right.
great. But right after, what? Oh. It starts all over again. But luckily, what's been fun for me, as Yogananda shared in the autobiography of Yogi, that we have the physical body, the astral body, the causal body. So for fun, I thought, usually, off the road vehicles maybe have two spares, but most conventional cars have one spare. But we have two. This physical body drops off. We've done it over and over and over again. Those that are attuned to reincarnation, and then it's the astral body, and then in higher states and so forth. And we really, on a soul level, are in touch with all three. But that's subtle stuff. But to have two spares, so we needn't be concerned if we want to put on the philosopher's hat that when we fall off the cliff or God knows what happened, all of us are going to leave at one time or another in some fashion. Then guess what? We got a couple spares, and so we're fine. We're fine. As Ramakrishna said, death is just going from one room to the other. And so that that takes the sting and the fear, if that's something that we harbor, out of this transition.
Yeah.
And that's important because otherwise, we blow it out of proportion. I like to call it the penny before the sun. The sun is gone when you have the penny there, but guess what?
Right.
The sun's a little bit bigger than the penny, but we can blow these things that are creating doubt in our minds or confusion. And so then we've got to just get with the program and just making us happy.
Right.
If not, because all these thoughts that come in, they masquerade that they're here to help.
Right.
Like the Trojan horse. This is a nice gift for you. I don't think so. So this is constant, all this stuff. But again, it's not anything to be sad about or discouraged, because this is how we get strong. Disciplined mind's a happy mind, as I said. So thank God that we're at a point that we have a place like Ananda, and that Swami Kriyananda was willing to go through the austerity of putting this place together was not easy. One time he was asked, would you all again found another Ananda? And he stuck his tongue out and went, which was like, no way, once is enough. Of course, he discovered, he founded many through other people, but for him to again start from scratch, been there, done that,
Somebody else's turn.
Yeah. And then, of course, Yogananda's vision, of World Brotherhood colonies that were so near and dear to him. At one point, he had to chant. He was thinking so much about World Brotherhood colonies. This is master. He had to chant to get his mind back because he was just, going into all the incredible aspects of what community could be.
Wow.
And in time, as he said, it'll spread like wildfire. There'll be communities all over. And people are finding that out because it's not working all that well, on a lot of levels,
Yeah.
Just,
Well,
you name it.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to, in a way, extend gratitude also, because you said your generation kind of messed things up, but also a segment of your generation also helped to start this movement of
that's
communities that really
That's right.
is making an impact. And you think in just a short span of time, really one generation, how much this movement of Ananda, but it's not the only one that is going to happen, how much it's flourished in just a 50 short years, 60 short years.
Incredible.
And it's probably, as you said, in India, going to be growing much quicker too.
Incredible. Swami used to have fun saying that, when the community movement started in the 60s and we were part of it, he said, usually the communities only lasted 1 month. Why? The rent was due. That was it, man. I didn't come here to, work, man. I came here to go to the river. You guys are just a bunch of materialists. Yeah. So, just like, 1 month. Okay, well, that's something.
Right. But 50 years later, there's something there with a real magnetism.
Well, Swami's passing, as, I think maybe he talked about, maybe Jyotish and Devi talked about that very often when the founder leaves, whatever it might be, maybe it's corporate, maybe it's spiritual, fill in the blanks, that's the end. The light is out. It's the end of that particular endeavor. But Swami was not a micromanager. He allowed people to make mistakes. As Jyotish used to say that when Ananda first started, all you had to do was chant Om and you were in, because we were needing members. It was probably pretty close to the point too. Probably how I got in. And so, bit by bit, one begins to appreciate on a level that we can't put words to what Ananda means to us. And there's so many times when Swami talked about there's people that'll never ever come. Maybe they live, in the far reaches of the planet, but they say in so many words, just to know that Ananda exists is everything to me. Because they feel that vibration, the miracle, the real miracle of people cooperating. And it is a miracle because, as Swami said, Ananda attracts eccentrics.
Yeah, it's true. Living here for a few years, it does.
Totally that. When I first came, it wasn't long. We had 100 different countries represented.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty incredible. And also, Master said, I attract stubborn people. And of course, it meant stubborn, positive. That positive stubbornness.
Yeah.
Not just
strong will.
Being a jackass that you can beat him with a stick and he isn't going to budge until he's had his fill of grass. But the stubbornness, the tenacity has been required too, because austerity is, of course, a part of the path. It's not negative. It's just, if we understand that it's one tunnel after another, but the light at the end of the tunnel. And we hope this is the last tunnel, but just in case it's not, guess what? It's another tunnel. And that's just what we're doing. But we're growing,
right?
As we're going through these experiences.
What were the conditions when you first came? Do you remember what the grounds were like?
Oh, yeah, vividly. Yeah. Well, Jyotish did more than that. He willed me his teepee. And so I was living on a picnic table at the time because there weren't any tents. This is up in the meditation retreat. So I was there for 3 weeks, never lived on a tent. I was raised in Manhattan Beach. I didn't live on a picnic table. I had my own room with my brother. So Anyway, in time, winter was coming, and so he was needed down in the village, basically for disciplining the troops down there because it was important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to have that gift of his teepee, and that's where I lived for many, many years. But it was the Wild West.
Hmm.
It was a hog farm.
Hmm.
That's what the village was. It was a hog farm.
Really?
And so, I remember one time taking a shower, and I thought, God, I just don't seem to be getting clean, And finally, I cupped my hands. It was pond water. And I was thinking, am I getting cleaner in the shower or dirtier, etc.
Uh-huh.
So much of this stuff
Uh-huh.
was going on. And so many people not understanding what Swami's vision was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was tough. And lucky for me, we comprised about maybe a third of the community, monks and nuns, and so that kept us concentrated and focused. And
Mm.
that was just what we did. We just served and meditated.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, go out and have some fun. But in those days, your salary was $0 to maybe $25 a month. you know, and we got fed, and we had a teepee over our head or a funky trailer or something or other, so it all worked.
Mm-hmm.
But now you look around, we dreamed of paved road for years.
Mm.
There was one road going up, beyond the ridge, that last hill takes you to the various clusters. We had to chain up in
Really?
the mud, not in the snow, in the mud. No exaggeration.
Wow.
So much of that, and many, 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 many stories of I milked goats. When
Mm-hmm.
I never milked a goat in Manhattan Beach. I never would have dreamt of milking a
Mm-hmm.
goat. So at different times, I think most of us, myself included, we'd wear 6 different hats. So,
Mm-hmm.
you're a fireman, and so you volunteer over there, and then you work in the jewelry company, and so you're doing that, and you're and so on, because that's what was needed. You just had so many different things to do, and it was really, really wonderful, and still is. As a matter of fact, I think probably half the time we wear numerous hats
Uh-huh.
still to this day. But the place was really starting from scratch.
Mm.
No question about it. And the miracle was that Swami got the meditation retreats, 73 acres. He wanted it for himself. But then word got out that he was there, and so that was the end of that. But the neighbors were concerned because we own that property in common with, various neighbors, the meditation retreat. Then years later, he had no money for the meditation retreat, and he had no money for the village.
Wow.
But his thought was this: Master, if you want this to be done, fine. But if we fail, you must have something else in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Who could have that kind of detachment with something that was so near and dear to Swami,
Mm-hmm.
so near and dear to Master, but at the same time, here we go. And when I first arrived, he had enough of filling the refrigerator and all of that stuff. He was in the city,
Mm-hmm.
different class in different cities, in the Bay Area. And finally, he came up and said, "Listen, guys, I'm not doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's time for you guys to pitch in
Mm.
because, your sugar daddy is coming back to move here, okay?"
Uh-huh.
At that point, he'd been, some years, building community and with help, but, he
Right.
was the driving force, the buildings, the land, and all that stuff. So it was not only were we so green because we were
Mm-hmm.
so green. What's meditation and what's service and,
Mm-hmm.
all the basics. But on top of it, Swami was learning too.
Hmm.
He didn't know how to start a community. He was just doing it
Mm.
intuitively. As a matter of fact, many years ago with Joe Tish, he was at the Song of the Morning Ranch in Michigan, jail for blacks place.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a question, uh, and you can see it on YouTube. It's fantastic. And so the question was, how did you start Ananda? And Swami said, frankly, I don't know how. It was just a series of miracles.
Really?
To this day,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same.
All right.
To this day. And I loved it because he was just, the question I think kind of stunned him a bit,
Right.
maybe you can tell me, I don't know. Yeah. But it was all just
Mm-hmm.
intuition. It was just, now let's do this and now let's do that and so
Mm.
forth and so on. And also, in the early year, there was a lot of negative people. At one point, they left and so forth. But he made a point to say, at Ananda, this is speaking ideally, we're here to, and you can have this too if you like, um, uh, we're here to make world people better.
Mm.
Yeah. And so that's tough because this is the path, out of joy springs compassion, and people that have the good karma to get here, but still don't really have what it takes to stay
Right.
because they've got too much baggage and so on.
Mm-hmm.
It's painful to see, and they can stay a little bit and then they have to go and all that. Maybe they'll come back again in time, but Swami said that basically he just worked with positive people, so he was very fortunate
Mm-hmm.
that Jyotish, right from the start in
Mm-hmm.
1966, even before Ananda, existed, was there in San Francisco helping Swami, and Devi came along too, and others that really had the faith that Swami, he was on to something.
Right.
You
Mm-hmm.
could feel the joy. And there were, lots of times where I scratched my head. He'd bring out his guitar. In those days, he played guitar. He was, again, in his 40s, and he'd play Shakespeare songs. And I'd be going, who is Sylvia? And I'd be going, why aren't we chanting? You know? But I knew he knew what he was doing. He was striking the balance, like Master giving the monks ice cream, and
Uh-huh.
so on, to strike the balance. Um, I thought, well, this is a good challenge. Let me go underneath
Mm.
the Shakespeare songs and see what is there.
Mm.
It was the same as the chanting. The vibration was the same. So
Mm-hmm.
when he would read P.G. Wodehouse, I mean, everybody's laughing and horsing around. And I think, well, again, I challenged everything. What's that? Being a good Virgo, what
Mm-hmm.
is that? Same thing, the undercurrent. Yeah.
Mm.
So after a couple of those things, I think, loved to throw everything in the country and the kitchen sink at us from time to time. He enjoyed shocking people, just for the fun of it, but for lessons too. I just thought, he knows what he's doing. I may not know what he's doing
Mm-hmm.
and have to put some of these things on the shelf.
Right.
What is the Karma Yogi?
Mm-hmm.
One of the original questions we shared. Because this vibration that was coming out of him, Master's vibration, was something that really
Mm.
was trusted. It just, he wants God is coming over from, and he discovered the autobiography, came over, he loved to share, 4 nights and so forth on the bus. All he wanted was to find God and to share God, and that was his entire life to his last breath.
Mm.
Yeah. At one point, there's another wonderful video on YouTube of him in Pune, and he's giving a satsang. And he said, something? He was 82 or something like that. He said, I think I'm a little bit crazy. Because I'm working harder than I've ever worked. And everyone laughed and so on. But that was him because
Right.
he couldn't do enough, to please his guru.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And to share it, by example,
Mm-hmm.
that, there are so many things we can do. Find something, anything he would say.
Mm.
Anything. Um, I love, I came across a quote of Yogi Berra, and anybody that's a baseball fan, the Yankees. And, he was a funny guy, but he was really a philosopher too. And one of his comments was, if you come to a crossroads, take it. And that was farming. Just,
Mm.
Just continue to put out energy.
Mm.
Naturally, we want to refine and use discrimination, but the main thing is get off the couch, put out energy,
Mm.
and by that vortex of that energy and the magnetism and all, then those things that are your own, etc., if they don't come right away, will come in time.
Mm.
But the main thing is put out energy. And so to this day, you see Jyotish and Devi and all that stuff, and they probably think they're a little bit crazy too with the face. Every time I turn around, they're on the plane back to India and Europe and so on. But as shining example, they are doing what they feel
Right.
that Divine Mother, Swami, wants them to do. So that's,
Mm-hmm.
we all, as we get into the Gray Hair Club, are thinking, maybe there'll be, the thought to go get a little cabin and hang out by the brook.
Head to
And
the
we're all for it. I think
Uh-huh.
pretty much across the board we're all experimenting in our own way, and it's not to say just the old people go through all this thought of maybe I can head to the caves and go see Babaji, but at the same time, as we well know, the main thing is just to be real.
Mm-hmm.
Just be real. Know yourself, so that even if we have to do a U-turn because we had something we wanted, but it wasn't exactly what Divine Mother wanted,
Ah.
and so the bliss was gone,
Mm-hmm.
and so best to turn around and start
Right.
back at square one and see if we can find our way.
Hmm.
So Swami always allowed everyone to make mistakes, big mistakes even, huge mistakes even.
Mm.
As
Oh.
who has the courage? So many leaders are micromanagers,
Mm.
and no one can learn anything because they're doing everything.
Right.
But Swami was the absolute opposite, and that's why, really, to a very great extent, Ananda has been able to grow and flourish.
Wow. It's such a practical application of
Mm,
metaphysics too. Is just
mm,
move the energy and let it guide you.
right.
Don't. It's so easy to get caught up of what's my next step, what's my next step,
Yeah,
and you're afraid to make mistakes, like you said.
that's right.
And it's such a practical way of working with yourself and also with others. And
That's right.
it's so great that we have these examples, and I'm so happy that we've been
Mm-hmm.
able to sit down. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so maybe
That's
we'll end
good.
it here with just those
Sounds good.
beautiful thoughts.
Sounds good. Well, it has been a joy, because good old satsang, where two or more gathered there, I'm in the midst of them. We see that again and again and again
Hmm.
with spending time with one another. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy to spend some time with you.